It is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That is the band Ritual from Cleveland, Ohio, from their re-release of their 1990s classic, Trials of Torment. And the name of the tune there is Where I Belong. And where this guy belongs is in front of a mic, entertaining the fans out on stage. I want to welcome to the Classic Metal Show for the first time, vocalist Juan Ricardo. How are you, Juan?
I'm great. How is everyone? I'm doing awesome.
Well, good. Are you staying warm in Cleveland? It's been kind of a brutal winter here in the last few weeks, and being that you're a singer and your instrument is your voice, has it taken a toll on the vocal cords?
No, I've been really lucky so far. It's been really cold. I love to go running, but it's been so cold I haven't been running. So working out inside and stuff like that. I'm pretty into working out and staying in shape and that sort of thing. So I've been staying out of the cold, staying well. I have a lot of shows to do, and so a lot of singing to do. So I want to be at my best.
Absolutely. Well, Juan, here on the Classic Metal Show, we like to feature classic metal bands. Of course, we like to feature bands from Cleveland, since my partner, Chris, he's a long-term Cleveland native, and he's...
Clevelandite? Is that how you...
Clevelandite, yeah.
Yes, I think, I don't know. Cleveland? I don't know. That sounds terrible. Clevelandite.
Yeah, and he's hosted the metal show on WMMS years ago, and I started the classic.
That's right.
I started the Classic Metal Show down in the Akron area back in 1996, and here we are. We're into our 24th year, and you've been doing this You've been doing this a long time as well. I mean, you've been around the block, and you've been singing a long time, and you've had a lot of bands and a lot of projects that you've been involved with. And
yes, I have.
Here you are, 25, 26 years later, with the re-release of this CD, Trials of Torment. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how this came about, as to how a CD that was recorded so long ago got resurrected, and why it's getting a buzz, now.
Well, I mean, the basic story of Ritual and that album, going back to 1990s and late 80s, the band's original name was Torment, in case for people that don't know, formed in 1988. I was actually singing for a different band. They were around a couple years, put a couple demos out, saw me at a show. I was singing for the band Attacks at the time. They were looking for a new vocalist and asked if I'd be interested, and we recorded a demo called Relapse of Aggression that actually was selling in Europe. A German record label, heard the demo, loved it, and signed the band. What happened next then is they actually brought us to Germany. They brought us to Germany to record an album. When we were there, they told us, well, there's a band here in Europe called Torment, the underground kind of death metal band, and said, you're going to have to change your name. So while we were in the studio, we changed our name to Ritual. But we called the album The Trials of Torment because we were basically given 3 weeks to record the album. So what would typically take 3 months, we did in like days. I actually sang the entire vocals for the album, like in the last 3 days of the session.
Right.
And it was just, in that kind of sense, it actually turned out good, because usually when you record an album, you're, really critically, wanting to change this or do different things, and we didn't have time for any of that. It literally, we went on, pure adrenaline and machismo and, and just youth at the time, and just really recorded very fast, and the album just ended up turning out just amazing.
Right.
When it was released, in the end of 1992, it went to number 1 in Germany, in Belgium, in Austria. The title track, the song "She Rides the Sky," was number 1 in Germany, which is unbelievable. I mean, like the song after it was an ABBA song. I mean, it's like crazy to think of these days. But it just would be the most requested song in like Belgium and all. It's like when they released it in Europe, it just took off completely.
Right.
What happened, what kind of makes Ritual being this sort of cult band, is when we returned to America, the album did not have a release. It was not released in America at all. We couldn't get a distributor. At the time, it was the change at that time from us being this thrash, speed, power metal band, and it was sort of the upswing of death metal at the time, and all the metal labels were just signing and releasing death metal bands, and they would not distribute our record.
And so also the whole grunge thing was in full swing at that point too.
Yes, exactly. You got it right on the money. The grunge was coming on, so it literally was like we were like this, great band with this great album with no marketing here in America, and so we just sort of like were kind of disgruntled about it, and everybody started to do these other projects. Well, one of the big motivators at the time was the bass player Jack's brother had formed Mushroomhead and decided to go back to his original band. He'd also helped form the Spud Monsters. So he decided to go back to the Spud Monsters, and that left the bass open, and Jack, the bass player from Ritual, became the bass player of Mushroomhead. He was in the bass player for Mushroomhead for 20 years.
Right.
And so that kind of thing, and the guitar player went to form this band. I formed my own band. Everybody just sort of made their own bands, and it just sort of disbanded. There was no big fight or something, or we had a 5-album deal and only made that one album.
Yeah.
And so then it just was sort of left off of that. And then what happened recently is, of course, I've been signed to Pure Steel and sing for Wretch and Sunless Sky. And it turned out when I went to Germany on tour, I stopped by the Pure Steel office. I wanted to meet the people in the office and at the label, and I met the owner of the record label, Andreas. Well, the first thing Andreas did is when I walked in the office that day, there in Schwarzenberg, Germany, he was holding a copy of Ritual, The Trials of Torment, an original copy that he had bought himself back when he was a fan. And I was just the biggest. I said, I can't believe you had this album, because this is like the greatest ever album. And that began the whole thing about, wow, we should do something. We should have a reissue. But it still wasn't a band. There wasn't really any. So, but when I came back, I began talking to members. Listen, there's a real fan base still in Germany, in Europe for the music. I think we should think about doing a reunion. We weren't too sure. And then this past year, I was the organizer of the Pure Steel Metal Fest in Cleveland, a 3-day festival. And I asked the guys, listen, this is coming up in October. Would you guys like to do a reunion for that show? And that was sort of the catalyst of what was happening. And so we got together. Basically, after 25 years, for the first time ever, performed at that concert, and the response was just unbelievable. We didn't. I think we expected it for people to enjoy it, but we didn't expect the place to be packed. And then they'll do another show at the Beachland Holidays Metal Fest, and that was packed. And it's just like that just turned the whole thing over. And the label said, "Listen, you guys we want to reissue the album. Now we've booked the tour. It's just literally just been something very, very cool, something, unexpected. Because at the time, the old members of the band were kind of like, do people really want to hear stuff from 30 years ago? But it turns out, I guess, there are a lot of people, especially in Europe, that never saw us play. Ritual was sort of like this one-hit wonder, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Well, I would venture to say that Europe, unfortunately, would be your market for sure, because I know that Bill Peters has had more success with his Cleveland bands in Germany and Europe than he's had here in the States. And Bill has been a real trooper, doing his Metal on Metal show for as long as he has, and obviously running Auburn Records for as long as he has, and promoting metal bands out of Cleveland and sticking by them, and, doing everything he can to promote metal in Cleveland, even though, that is a very, very niche market, as I'm sure you're well aware, being that you've been around there forever and a day.
Bill's been great, a huge supporter for all this time. I've known him and friends with him for 30 years probably.
Right, absolutely. But it's very fortunate that, you have a fan over in Germany on Pure Steel Records that, wants to revive and revitalize Ritual, and giving you the opportunity to at least get out there and do a one-off tour if that's where it leads, but it's better than nothing at all. Right. It's better than a kick in the ass, right?
Exactly right. Right. I mean, I hope, I hope it isn't, it just ends up being that, but if it is, it says that it was done. You know what I mean? We feel we actually did it, rather than, another couple years go by and everybody looks back on this and go, wow, we should have. You know what I mean? That you don't want to live in regret. That's something you don't want to do.
Well, that's unfortunately a half a lifetime ago for both of us.
That's true. That's true. But it's metal is something I'm very passionate about, and I sing a lot, sing for a lot of bands, love to go on tour, and obviously because I sing for a lot of bands,
right?
And so, but
this
is something that's especially close to my heart for sure.
Sure, absolutely. Well, what keeps you in Cleveland? I mean, obviously you're a very talented vocalist, and anybody who is extremely serious about the music business, up until modern day technology has allowed, people to live all over the world and trade MP3s or, their tracks back and forth and things. What keeps you in Cleveland of all places? I mean, when you could go to New York or LA or, somewhere where the music scene was more vibrant at one point, to where a singer of your caliber could have very easily gotten hooked up with, an up-and-coming band that maybe could have blown up a little bit larger, but Cleveland, and this is not a knock on Cleveland, I'm just saying it's a Midwest town that isn't on the coasts where more often than not things happen.
Right. Well, for me, it was basically family. Even though I constantly am singing and constantly playing and in the studio and I do a couple hundred shows a year, I still, was raising a family at the time. Kids, a home, wife, kids, a home. That whole thing. It's an attempt to live a dual life, I guess, a basic normal life at home, and still be making the music I did, and I guess I could have done what you're saying and left and gone, but I loved Cleveland. I love having raising a family here, and even though I left a lot and to do a lot of shows and stuff like that, it still was good to come home to. I don't know if I would want to live in LA or live in New York. I've been to both those places, and I guess it's what do you want out of life, really? I guess, you know what I mean? And so I don't know if, even though career-wise it might have done better for me, as life-wise, do I want to raise a family in LA? Do I want to raise a family? Definitely not in New York.
Right.
Definitely not in New York. I mean, the lore of that kind of thing didn't really, appeal to me as much as that was sort of. I still try to have some sort of what do you call it? A base in a normal life, I guess.
Outside of the glitz and glamour of being on the stage entertaining fans, you'd like to have like a normal existence,
right? Right.
Sure.
Exactly.
Well,
I think I made the right choices. Depends how you look at it. Career-wise, could I been in bigger bands? I'm sure I could have, but I don't really regret my choices, I guess.
Sure. Well, absolutely. Well, you're surrounded by good company there in the Cleveland, Ohio area. My good friend Billy Morris obviously lives there, and he's always been a champion of local music and owning clubs where local bands could perform and work with some national acts that he's often brought into the Cleveland area to perform at his venues. And of course, to the south of you got my good friend Tim Ripper Owens, who did a stint in Judas Priest. And then obviously you mentioned Mushroom Head, who gained some national notoriety for a while there in the 90s. And so Cleveland is rich with music history and people who imbibe in that and still reside in Cleveland and make a living, or if they don't make a living at doing their music, at least they have that as something that they still do, and as well as you. Now, outside of the music realm, do you do anything else?
No, actually, I sing for 6 bands right now.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm also, like I said, the organizer of the festival, and I work for the record label, and an A&R rep for the record label. Which makes a lot of sense because I sing for so many bands and I see a lot of bands. I probably, when it comes to bands either playing with or opening for bands I play with, I probably see, a couple hundred bands a year. So it's great for talent and, but I try to, help bands from the area as best I can. So that's, looking to sign bands like that, but I look at bands from all over, so that's part of what I do. Part of also is media attention for the record label, which is the reason why I organized the festival for one. And just, there's just a lot of things I really enjoy doing, and I believe in metal. I believe in Pure Steel. I believe because they're an underground. I can remember, that sort of idea of it still being close knit, a brotherhood we call it, and try to and it's like the idea is that together we'll rise up, I guess. So it's we work together and that kind of thing, and so it's definitely not an easy life, but to travel a lot and to play and to music as a business. But I don't think there's anything else I'd rather do right now.
Sure, absolutely. Well, since you are on the performance side and the business side, working some A&R, in today's day and age, in today's technological culture, as it were, what does a label, be it Pure Steel or I can't speak for Auburn Records or anybody else, but what's in it for a label today to do anything, since the internet is so strong and social media is so strong and YouTube and everything where bands can record and promote their own stuff? What's in it for a label today? And I'm only asking purely out of curiosity because I really don't know the answer. So from someone
well,
who's
the thing. Well, first off, I would say that the way, and I can use Pure Steel as right now, the turn to a digital age is something that we're embracing, because you have to change with the times. Even though we are a specialty label in the sense that we cater to the not just the metal fans, but to traditional metal fans and to metal fans that are still traditional, so that they like. We offer the albums in vinyl. We have the hard CDs, but we have also made a push toward the digital age and sending a thing with Sony Orchard for more digital access to our music, because a lot of people are, like you say, they're downloading albums now. They don't even have the CDs. They download the music or they just listen. Overall, everybody has to find a niche, and like I said, Pure Steel's niche is to that still hardcore, traditional kind of fan. The person that they hear the music, they order the CD, they even order the vinyl. That kind of fan. So it's in that sense we have that niche, but also it's like you say, it's difficult. What's a label do? But a label has a large reach. Okay, like for Pure Steel releases albums in 22 countries. When an album comes out, 1,500 media members get, the email and the download to the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So
I get the same thing here for the Classic Metal Show.
Exactly, and so then that's, the idea is that you don't know what's going to hit. You don't know, but it's really, I guess it's like investment. It's kind of like you take a certain amount and you're putting it toward a project or a product. I hate to use the word product. That sounds awful, but a project. And you promote it, you push it, and it's still, if you're into the business side of it, there's still this energy and there's kind of fun, almost this intrigue of how something does, and you work with a lot of people. Band people are very different, It's like especially it's me as an A&R rep, so I talk to a lot of bands and try to help with their different problems, or the problems they think they are problems anyway. That's the way I always say it, because there's always actually easy solutions. They just don't see them because they're kind of like they're too close to the forest to see the trees. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, that's a lot of fun. I talk to a lot of them and try to find solutions to what problems they might have. But for the label, I think especially I can only speak for Pure Steel. The other labels that have bigger bands and are selling a lot of records. Obviously, it's a lot to do about money, and where the flow of money comes from these days now. A lot is digital. I would definitely say that on a royalty side of things, I can speak for myself. Personally, I will get probably more royalty from digital every year than I do from actual hard sale these days, and that's also the way the contracts are formulated too. Because when you do an album or you do a disc, there's cost for manufacturing, cost for distribution. All those things are factored into the royalty, the percentage that a band will receive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas a digital, when the digital rights to an album, bands sometimes get 50% of that. There is no manufacturing. You make definitely a lot more money on the actual someone buying the digital you're making more money on that than someone actually buying a physical copy, which costs a lot more. If that makes any sense.
Sure. Well, what are your thoughts on streaming music services such as Spotify or Google Play or Pandora or any one of those?
YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube. I mean, I think I can't.
You went away. Now you're back.
I lost you.
You left off with "I think," and that's where it ended.
Well, I think I'm not going to say it's a bad thing because we kind of use it as free promotion. So I mean that's where you have to kind of look at it as a positive because there is no turning back the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is no going back to a time when there isn't all these, people can just, look up a band and just look up. I can look up every album. When the album of the year for me personally was Firepower last year, Judas Priest.
Right.
That album was on YouTube in its entirety, literally the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it goes.
And I said to myself, really? I mean, literally the next day. So at this point, there's no, going back to, those sort of days when we had this control over this heavy-handed control. People do what they do, and you have to just, find solutions, I guess is the best. I don't, you have to use it not as a negative, but use it as a positive. And
sure.
I guess what we kind of do is it's actually free. If we release a video and it's on YouTube and people are just playing the song, or downloading songs and then downloading the album and then putting it on YouTube. I mean, there's very, you're not going to go after this person and take down that. I mean, you would do that all day. It's not really. It's more likely than to find it, people will listen to it, and then some people will be like, you know what? I want this. I want the actual copy of this. You know what I mean? I want my own copy of this.
Right.
So in that sense, we kind of are hoping for that kind of response. I want an actual CD, or I want to go see the band in concert, and that's another venue of that. I want to actually go have a merch. I want to buy T-shirts, that kind of thing. There's still people. Luckily, people still want to see bands live. Luckily, people still love that experience, and people love new music, and so even when it's older bands putting out new music. So, that part of the experience is still vibrant, and so in that sense, which is good.
Right. Well, I know that Metallica was in Cleveland a week ago, and
yes.
They played at the Q, and it was pretty much a sold out crowd. And when bands like Metallica, who've been around for 30 plus years, or bands like AC/DC who pretty much are on their last legs, and Kiss, who claims that they're on their farewell tour, and so many of those bands from that era, when that day is over, when they're 90 years old and they can no longer crawl up on the stage and perform, who's going to be the next arena act, or is the arena era over?
Wow. Wow. For metal?
Yeah, well, for hard rock or metal.
Wow.
Because who's going to fill out an arena? I know there's going to be club shows forever in a day, but who's
right.
going to sell an arena act? Who's going to be the next AC/DC or Kiss or Metallica or Iron Maiden or Guns N' Roses? Who's going to be the next one, or is that era over?
Wow, I never really thought of it that way. Really, the bands that are still selling out arenas, or that's a Q, if you want to use the Q as an example, are those bands from, the 80s and the 90s. Is there a band from metal band from a later date that does that? I don't. Dream Theater?
Nah, they don't sell arenas.
Yeah. Could you name one?
No, I can't. But
Oh
but,
my
but,
God.
but I wanted.
I never really thought of that.
Yeah, well, I wanted that input from a guy who is a singer and's been around a long time and who does work for a record label. The unfortunate part, and we've discussed this on the Classic Metal Show on several occasions, I think the arena era is over. I can't even imagine a up and coming act or a newer act having.
Well, I guess if you for a band, a metal band, to go from city to city or country to country doing that, I think I'm going to have to probably agree. I mean, some bands in regionally pack large venues. I mean, Vader in Poland, for instance, or you know what I'm saying? Regionally in their own country or their own state, or there might be bands that would pack a large venue, but a band that has that sort of draw worldwide or from country to country, I might have to agree with you. I'm hard pressed to think of one that could be like that. That isn't an old band. That isn't, you know what I mean? But we don't know who's coming, though. I like to be an optimist at this.
Well,
but you really have put a knife in there I haven't really thought of.
Well, here's the thing, and we kind of analyzed this and broke it down a little bit. The reason that this won't happen is because of the internet and because of the widespread easy access for everyone and anyone who has a band to get their name out there. So it's so diluted that not one band will ever rise to the top as like the band. Like back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, when the only outlets you had for commercial play was obviously radio. And then, of course, the MTV era came in. Those made superstars out of the bands because it was controlled. Only a select few bands made it on MTV, and only a select few bands made it on commercial radio. But commercial radio does not play new music anymore as far as rock is concerned. And there is no MTV anymore. The internet is wide open. Anybody can make a video. Anybody can release their music. Anybody has Facebook or whatever social media. So nothing stands out because it's so diluted. So it doesn't make it special anymore because there's just so much of it out there. You can't filter through it and pick one or two winners per se. So there's nothing that stands out.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I see so many bands now on these different sites and stuff, and that I'm like, oh my God, what a great band!
Yeah.
I'm saying it all the time. I say it like, wow, this band is freaking awesome. Good.
Sure, it's not that it's not that there isn't talent out there. There is, but nothing puts it to the forefront like limiting 10 bands to commercial radio. That's the only 10 bands you're exposed to, because everybody can go on YouTube or the internet and find 1,000 bands in a certain genre, whether it's rock or pop or metal, and it's just like, wow, that's a good one. That one's not so good. Oh, that's pretty good. That one's so-so. But not one of them stands out because there's just so many to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, I guess I guess you're right. I know you're right. It's just I am still trying to think of someone who could rise to that level and surprise us. Maybe Nightwish, or some of these more classical sort of bands. I don't know, Camelot maybe. I don't know. They'd still not arenas though. That's I guess a different level when I think
right.
of it that
well,
way.
that's kind of what I'm focusing on, because I saw some of the advertisements for the upcoming summer shows, and bands like The Who are still out there performing and selling out arenas, and they've been around since 1962.
Wow.
You know, if you think about it, so there's Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend out there still banging away at The Who after 55 years, 56 years.
Why not if you're going to sell that many tickets?
Well, no, I'm not faulting them for doing it, but what I'm saying is even The Who or the Rolling Stones of all people who've been around since the 60s still selling arenas, but as soon as those guys die off or call it a day, and it's happening too. They're right. They're dying and calling it off every day. Yeah. So who's left to play that big arena show? Nobody.
That's a very dire thought.
It is. So you're fortunate enough to be involved with Pure Steel Records, who has an in with some of the bigger festivals in Germany, be it the Wacken Festival or the Download Festival, or even the festival you guys are going to be playing, the Full Metal, what is it? I can't even pronounce it.
Yes. Full Metal Othessin.
Yes, you guys are going to be playing some European dates, which is, again, like I said at the beginning of the interview, that unfortunately is your market, because the U.S., the good old U.S., Cleveland, Ohio, does not support that kind of a thing in a mass way.
Right.
So,
which is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. But, getting away from that, you also are involved with Bill Peters' band, Wretch.
Yes, I am.
So tell us a little bit how you got involved with Wretch, and Wretch also has a new release coming out in March.
Yeah, the new release and a European tour also. I've known Wretch, the band, Nick from Wretch, a long time, going all the way back to, the 80s. We were both signed to Wretch, and my band Attacks were both, and Torment, which became Ritual, all signed to Bill's Auburn record at one time. And we're all on the Heavy Artillery compilation back from 1988. So I've known them a long time, and what basically happened is, of course, they had changed singers a number of years ago, and then recently, about 3 years ago, their singer decided to hang it up and quit. A good friend of mine, Ron Emig, was singing for them, and Nick called me up and said, "Juan, would I be interested in singing for Wretch?" And Wretch has always been one of my favorite bands, and I just thought it would be a huge opportunity for me, and so we got together and made an album a couple years ago called The Hunt, and now we just finished a new album called Man or Machine, and we'll be going to Europe. And Wretch has been, like I said, I went with Wretch a couple years ago for a long tour, and now we're going for another couple weeks or so. Wretch did it the old-fashioned way. They went there, got on a festival, went back, did a couple more festivals. Then this past time we went, we were the direct support for another band. And this time we're going back as the headliner in Europe, doing, a good couple weeks of shows. We're headlining the Skull Fest festival in France. It'll be my first time in France. And to be headlining a festival, it's just an amazing thing. I mean, I love working at this. I love, singing, and when you see this response, for a band like Wretch, which is this, don't get me wrong, Wretch is a European style metal band. I mean, it's a band geared toward that kind of music. So the fact for them to be doing well there is not surprising, I guess. But like I said, it's been hard work. I mean, real hard work, and just a love for the music. And I think we have Man Machine is a really, really amazing album. Like I said, that's new material for me, so I have a little bit of fondness for it. So
sure. Well, it sounds like you have a full schedule in 2019 so far. Yeah,
well, yeah. I if I told you this, I mean, people who don't know me, who I am. I actually have 4 albums coming out this year. Of course, Rituals, the relapse, the reissue of Trials of Torment, the Wretch Man or Machine album, and those would be the push at first. And then when I get back home from the tours in April, I also sing for the German band Blind Cross, and that new album is been done and the video's done. It's just waiting now for, once I get past the tours, for that to be released. And I also sing for Dark Arena, which has a new album, The Worlds of Horror, that will be coming out also this late this spring, early summer. And of course, I also have my band Sun in the Sky, which has 2 albums out, and that album I'm working on right now. And that will come out, the end of summer, probably fall, something like that.
Right.
So,
well, if someone were to ask you, like myself, how would you distinguish yourself between all 4 of those bands as far as stylistic, delivery, description of, how would you describe it that this is what distinguishes Wretch from Ritual, from Dark Arena to, how would you describe that? Being that you're the focal point of all 4 of those.
Well, for me, for vocally, a lot of it, easily for me, the easiest distinction is the fact that they're of the tunings. For one, Ritual is a standard, it tunes in 440. So the singing is higher. I have to sing higher in order to be in the standard. Wretch is down tuned, so I sing lower, and then actually have higher high notes, if that makes any sense. It doesn't to the ear, but musically it makes sense. Whereas Ritual, I'm basically singing up all the time, a lot. Blind Cross is a very traditional band, almost like Armored Saint. So the singing's very old school style metal. Dark Arena, on the other hand, is a technical progressive death metal band, where I sing, but I sing, and everything is in harmonic minors. There's no major chords in any of it. It's all 7, 8-string guitars and 6-string bass. So it's very over the top. Over the top kind of epic, very epic sort of. So style-wise, I think of the bands technically in that sense. Like I said, Dark Arena being that very progressive band. So the melodies and the structure of things I do are very progressive, and whereas Ritual is, there's almost no harmonies to anything. It's straight power voice. There's very little dynamics going on at all. It is power from beginning to end. Wretch is lower. A little bit more meatier. I guess I don't know if the best description. A lot of. It's hard to think of.
It's heavier and ballsy.
Heavier and ballsier. I would definitely, that's I like that. Ballsy. It's definitely more ballsy because I'm singing, I'm a natural tenor, so it's not that singing high is difficult. But Wretch is the kind of music I could sing every day.
Yeah, instead of singing Queensryche, you're singing Metallica.
Right. I'm singing definitely more, Iron Maiden than Queensryche.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, Juan, is that I do a lot of interviews. We do a lot of interviews here on the Classic Metal Show. And when we talk to various artists about their product, I know you didn't like the word product, but their music, so many times it always refers back to the masters, be it Metallica, or you just mentioned Armored Saint, or Metal Church, or Testament, or the guys who set the bar. They set the bar. So that's the goal to reach. Is just like, well, those guys sort of like set the bar, so I guess it's up to us to either try to match it or exceed it. And I always find that interesting because it's just like the comparisons to the masters is always interesting. That we're more like Queensryche, or we're more like Dream Theater.
What's really funny too, and you literally can't get away from that. When my albums, or any of the band's albums that I'm mentioning, get reviewed, they are literally compared.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In every review, well, this sounds kind of like, this band, or sounds like Judas Priest, or sounds like Iron Maiden, or I sound like James Rivera, or he sounds like, Rob Halford here, I mean, which is really, I would prefer it to people would just say, Juan Ricardo sounds like Juan Ricardo.
Right.
But I guess, is that something in us that we have to have a comparison? Or we don't know how to,
what it is that these guys got into it early in the game, and they set the precedent, because even the 80s bands, well, that sounds like Led Zeppelin. Well, that sounds like Black Sabbath. Well, so those guys got into the game earlier. They were the forefathers. They were the forerunners. And so they are the ones who set the bar. And now everybody
I will tell you a little story, too. I'll tell you, and this is funny, because they're not that far apart, maybe only about 10 years. Judas Priest started in actually
74.
74, but, that era. So Queensryche is what? 80?
Yeah, 81.
We're in 81, something like that. When Queensryche, the EP came out with, Queen of the Reich and all that on
Yep,
the reviews were like, well, this band sounds like Judas Priest. Which is hilarious to me now when you think about it, that all these different reviewers were like, well, these are like a Judas Priest knockoff. They didn't sound anything like Judas Priest, but that's the way, because they had nothing else to compare it to. So that was what their knock was. Well, this is like a Judas Priest knockoff.
Well, it was the Rob Halford falsetto that they were comparing Jeff Tate's falsetto to, is that he was singing that high register, because Rob Halford had that scream, and Jeff Tate had that scream, So, it's unfortunate. Well, it's fortunate and unfortunate at the same time. And I agree with what you said, Juan, is that, it'd be nice to say, man, you sound like a classic Juan Ricardo recording. This is classic Juan, instead of saying, man, that's classic Halford. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I don't think there's anything I don't think there's anything we can do to get away from it. Even our good friend Tim Ripper Owens can't get away from the Judas Priest comparison now. Everything he does is now he is the Judas Priest imitator.
Wow, that's sad.
Well, it's true though.
To me, it doesn't sound anything like Rob Halford. To be honest.
but he's been stereotyped now, and now you can't get away from it.
Yeah, it's a great. That Three Tremors thing is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, all right, Juan. Well, I've taken up enough of your time. I appreciate your openness and your candidness about all your projects, and I appreciate the fact that you've been sticking in there for as long as you had, for 30 plus years, and never giving up the dream, and striving to continue to perform, whether you're out on stage in front of the audience, behind the mic, or behind the scenes working other bands and whatnot. So you are definitely a stalwart metal warrior, as Lemmy might say. And is there anything else you'd like the fans to know about Ritual or Wretch, or some upcoming tours, or any of your other projects?
I guess not really. Just that, for everybody that just, keep supporting the music, keep supporting your local bands, and, come out and see me sing sometime.
Excellent. Well, do you have a social media or a website or anything people could look you up?
Absolutely. You go to Juan Ricardo on Facebook. And very easy to find, and there are tons of YouTube stuff on there. If you're interested in the Pure Steel bands, you can go to puresteelrecords.com, and there's the Pure Steel Records shop, they call it, and you have hundreds of different CDs and links to different things. Like I said, that Ritual will be the album, as it turned out, Ritual and Wretch will both be for pre-sale March 1st. And the actual albums get released March 15th. Both bands will be on tour. Ritual first. I'm doing consecutive tours. I do this whenever I go. Makes it easier rather than flying back and forth. Recently, last couple of years ago, I went to Europe for a couple months and did like 55 shows in 60 days, something like that. But like I said, both bands will be on tour. Both bands' album coming out on pre-sale March 1st on the Pure Steel shop. Also, all the bands on Pure Steel are also available on like Amazon. They're also available on Sony Download. Just get out there and see the bands, enjoy the music, and hopefully I'll see you all very soon. March 2nd, Ritual's having a send-off show there at the Sly Fox, and Saturday before our European tour. And I'm sure we'll be at the Empire or someplace in Akron really soon. Us or Wretch, it's one of my favorite places to play. Other than that, thank you so much for having me on.
Perfect. All right, Juan. Well, it's been a pleasure. You're welcome back on the Classic Metal Show anytime. Go check out Juan with both Ritual and Wretch. They're touring over in Europe, and they're going to play a couple local shows here this spring. And go to their social media and their websites, and go check out Pure Steel Records, and go pick some stuff up and support metal. So, Juan, as a tradition here, we let the artist pick something from the new release or the re-release. And why don't you pick something from Trials of Torment, and maybe tell us a story about it?
Well, I guess, have you played She Rides the Sky?
No, we have not.
Okay, well then you have to play She Rides the Sky. She Rides the Sky was the song, like I said, when it was released in Europe, went to number one. I mean, it's crazy to think of a metal song charting on a music list, but it's a very special song. Is that the song was originally written with the band with the singer John Marshall when he was still in Torment. he'd written the melody lines, and just the name, She Rides the Sky, with no words, just a sort of thought, one of those things that you just sort of sing along and there wasn't really any structured words. And I'd heard a demo of it when I first joined the band. I said, this is really good. You should do something with this. And so then I wrote the words and completed the melody line. John ended up dying in a car crash a couple years after that. And so we always dedicate a lot of what we do to him in his memory. He was just an amazing person, an amazing songwriter. And my collaboration with him has been our most popular song, and is basically taken us to this point. So for all of you who have never heard it, this is Ritual, She Rides the Sky.
Well, here it is. It's Ritual, exclusively here on your Classic Metal Show.